Okay, my mob movie marathon is winding down to the final three. Goodfellows. One of the best mob movies ever made and one of the most authentic that follows the story of Henry Hill, an associate with the Lucasio crime family, and it chronicles his life from joining as a kid to going into witness protection with a all around great supporting cast. Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Paul Sorvino. A movie that's not just got great storytelling and also great fast paced editing. This is a movie that moves along at a feels like it moves along at a faster pace than you would think for a movie like this. It begins with the framing of his narration, which the movie is narrated throughout, talking about how he wanted to be a gangster since he was a kid. We see that he had a troubled school life, and the real Henry Hill had learning disabilities, which weren't as well studied back then and known about, so he was quickly written off as a troublemaker because he couldn't sing. He was even told by the principal of his school not to sing the Pledge of Allegiance, just to hum it. So when he got the chance to work as a kid for the Casey crime family, he jumped on it and quickly abandoned school. And Henry's life would just have a series of highs and lows that would end in disaster, at least his life in the mob. And the movie, what I like, it's framed in, I think, two halves, with him going to prison being the middle of it. There's his love affair with the mob, and there's the time when he falls out of love with the mob. After he grows up, he becomes a dependable worker, a dependable associate. He's under Jimmy Burke, or Jimmy Conway as he's called in the movie, who's another associate who's a huge earner and works with another associate by the name of, what did they call him? In real life, he was called Tommy DeSimone. I forget what his last name was in the movie, played by Joe Pesci, and this is one of Pesci's best roles, and he at least nailed the spirit of how unhinged Tommy DeSimone was. The real Henry Hill talked about a real life incident where just because he could, Tommy called a guy out on the street and shot him dead. These were not the honorable criminals that were depicted in The Godfather. These were thugs that terrorized the neighborhoods they were in. And we see some of that in the movie, even though the narration does color it, and it romanticized it in a way that Henry Hill did at the time, which is great. Again, I love the editing in this movie, how it paces us together, and the narration is the connected thread from the first scene to the last scene. We see Henry become a increasingly better earner for the mob, which culminates in one of his best moments being the Air France heist, where they walked away with a ton of money, and it's lamented him as a solid earner in the eyes of the family, which would naturally come with a little more protection. Eventually, he gets caught up in the murder of a made man. After Billy Batts gets out and he's at a bar owned by Henry celebrating his release from prison, he has words with Tommy DeSimone, who later kills him, which is a big no-no. Not only was because Henry Conway, Conway or Burke, whatever you want to call him, and Joe Pesci's Tommy DeSimone, they were all associates, not made men. And in the mob, you can't even raise your hand to a made man without getting killed. Just saying something that would be contuned as disrespectful to a made man can get you killed. So this is a murder they had to cover up and bury him in the dead of night, something that would come back to haunt them months later when they find out the property's been sold to a developer, so they had to dig him up and bury him someplace else. But again, that's just how unhinged Spilotro was. He would kill anyone. He didn't care if they were protected or not. We also get some of the story told through the eyes of Henry Hill's then wife, and she's the only other person that narrates this movie, be it, however, briefly. Eventually, he has an affair, and the rest of his group, because he's under Paul Cicero's crew, the rest of them pretty much pressure, you have to go back to your wife, and I get why. She knows what there is involved with. If there's ever a criminal case, she can be compelled to testify. He patches things over with her, then gets in trouble and goes to prison. And we get the scene where they're having all this gourmet food in prison. Now, in my research, I've heard this was slightly exaggerated, and I've also heard sources say this is 100% exaggerated. It was never like that. Which one is true? You make up your own mind. I don't know, and just use your own interpretation. This is where Henry starts dealing in drugs and begins to get addicted, which Paul Sorvino's character warns him about after prison, and there's a great scene where he's talking to him about it, and he slaps him, and you see like a look of shock on Henry Hill's face. That's because that wasn't called for in the scene. Paul Sorvino improvised it on the spot, so we're actually seeing the shock of Henry Hill's Ray Liotta playing Henry Hill, and it's great because he just stayed in character, and it made that scene feel more authentic, getting his honest reaction. Eventually, we see the Lufthansa heist, which was the largest heist in history, and Jimmy Burke then killing off everyone involved in the Lufthansa heist because it was greed. Other than the money he had to kick upstairs to the bosses, he wanted to keep the rest of it to himself. With the exception of Henry and Tommy DeSimone. Henry was making him too much money with the drugs, and Henry was smart enough never to ask for his money. Tommy eventually gets killed because his past caught up to him, and they called him to get made, and that's where he got killed. It's speculated John Gotti's the one that pulled the trigger because he was good friends with Billy Batts, who they killed, but it's not known. Eventually, Henry gets busted for his drug dealing, and I love the whole scene leading up to it. It's really frantically and hectically edited, but it really works because we're seeing this scene because the whole movie's from his point of view, and this scene really captures how chaotic it must have been to be that drugged out of his mind, which leads to him making an agreement to testify against a mob. And he put away a lot of people, but he did it to save his own skin because he knew he was marked for death. And then we see the great framing device of the narration. The narration is actually his testimony in court, and it was real. I love when a film has a great framing device like that, and unlike in Casino, which I did like, the narration does not wear as thin with me. Where Casino, I thought, over-explained too many things. Goodfellows explained just enough. And there is one scene that it always makes me laugh because I can relate to it, when he got put in witness protection and says, I ordered spaghetti and marinara sauce and I got egg noodles and ketchup. I live in North Carolina, but I was born and raised in New Jersey. So, okay, I want you to understand that every town had at least one pizzeria slash Italian restaurant. That was good, if not two or more. So, if you want good Italian food, you really didn't have to work hard or go out of your way to try it. And needless to say, the pizza here is very hit or miss, and much the way he took egg noodles and ketchup, that's kind of how I felt the first time I ordered spaghetti out here. Like the restaurant just did not understand what they were doing. Fortunately, I have a good recipe, but I've even been given some recipes by people around here that are awful. One person even gave me a recipe, ironically enough, where you use ketchup as the base. But that's a whole other story. That's line I can really relate to because I have lived that. Goodfellows, I'm going to give a solid A plus. There's not much I can say about this movie that hasn't already been said, unlike Gotti, the next film, a movie not many people talk about. This is not the Travolta version. This is with Armand DeSantis, and I'm really looking forward to this because I'm not thinking, what can I say that hasn't already been said? So few people talk about this one. I can say things that really haven't been said. I can really make this review my own. So, look forward to this one, and I believe this is actually free to watch on YouTube, so look it up. You'll probably enjoy yourself, so don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you soon, along with another project I'm working on. I've been rewatching the MCU movies, and I'm just going to critique the Phase 1, 2, and 3, so look for that in the very immediate future. Once I finish Phase 2, I'm going to record the Phase 1 and 2 videos, so over and out.